All right, everyone. So this is the final video where I'll walk you through Project One. And a lot of it is going to be kind of repeating techniques we've already walked through. Um, so we've started dumping images into this first Process Journal 1 file. I'm going to do what I did before in a minute and make copies. I do feel like some of you will benefit from keeping your document organized in Photoshop. So I started off well. I labeled each of my files before I added them. So this is flower 1, then flower 1 copy, and then flower 1 copy 2. If you want, especially if you think it will make it easier to navigate around Photoshop, I might label this, just so I remember it, maybe screen capture 1. I think I made that an apostrophe. Let's just leave it there. And then do a Command J. So I've now got a copy, and this is the file that I'm going to do size variations on. That looks good. Command J again to make an even smaller one. And again, in Photoshop, it's always better to make an image progressively smaller, not larger. And then return. And then I'll just keep adding to this file until I get something that's pretty darn large. So again, it's totally up to you. This is another screen capture I grabbed. If you would like to do that technique where you go to the magic wand tool, select subject, and add a layer mask. Once you've done it once, it's relatively easy. And again, this document doesn't really need to be precious. You're just deciding how easy it will be for you to trace a document eventually. So for me, because I'm a photographer and I don't draw all the time, I'm trying to make this document really, really, really easy to trace because I know that it's not my natural skill set necessarily. So I've got this document that has a lot of pretty darn big files. A lot of these will probably be bigger than I need. We're eventually going to use tracings to make 7-inch by 7-inch compositions. So it's nice to have a few big ones. We probably aren't going to need a ton more files to be this large. I'm going to keep adding to this one for a minute and I'll just let you watch. Feel free to skip around if you feel like, if you feel like you don't need to watch me make little mistakes. I'll just drag this one in so you see how it's a little tougher to navigate if you don't edit out the background. I'm going to just drag this into a corner. One thing you can do in terms of navigating the background, you can remember that Photoshop, when you do a layer stack, it literally thinks in stacks. So for example, if I drag this one in front, it's thinking like this whole strawberry file is sitting on top of everything I've added. So if I drag it around, it's going to be at the front. If I take this layer in my layers panel and I drag it lower, it'll assume that it's in the background. So this almost does the same thing. Whatever on the bottom, if it has a simple white background like this, it's not really an issue as long as it's the backmost file. So again, if I do a variation and it's smaller, you can see how it still complicates things, but it's not as big of an issue. So remember that layer order can also make your tracing life a little bit easier. And I'll just make that one smaller. Great. So I'll show you what this looks like at the end. Obviously, I've only got 4 unique images in this one. So I can maybe fit, 3 size variations of another unique image in, but I'll need to do at least 2 distinct files. And that's totally fine. This is Journal 1. I could just as easily go File, New. And you should see in your custom sizes, it normally defaults to a setting you've used before. So if I do 11 by 8.5 inches, resolution 240, I can just name this something nice and easy, like Journal 1-2, and hit create. So in an ideal world, I'll show you what these look like at the end, but you'll be able to create either one page that's completely filled with all these different size variations, or you'll create 2 distinct pages, or maybe even some of you will need to use 3. It really doesn't matter. I so far have a couple really small images, and it's that size variation that's important. Ideally, you'll be able to print off this at the end so you can trace it. If you don't have access to a printer, it is not ideal, and you'll want to be really careful not to damage your screen. But you can trace off of a laptop. So if you turn your screen brightness all the way up, I would recommend maybe working with a really like a sharp pencil or a pen if you don't put any pressure. You can trace off of your laptop or computer screen. Again, I stress you want to be careful not to damage your equipment when you do that, but it's possible. It's kind of nice because the computer screen is naturally light emitting. I'll walk through more of how that process looks in the next video.